Something I have always appreciated about Nintendo is the quality of their hardware, and more specifically, their controllers. From way back in the 90s, I don't ever recall having any issues with the SNES controller or the NES controllers. As a matter of fact, even with the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, I don't really remember too many problems. The biggest issue I would face would be sometimes the buttons would stick, but that's probably because we were kids and we had dirty hands, and usually cleaning it up with a wet toothbrush would solve that issue. Around the time that I had a Nintendo 64, I think we were wrapping the wires around the controller for just a little bit too tightly, leading the wires that were inside there to disconnect at some points, causing the controller to act funky. From a young age, I began to experiment. I figured out if the wires were just slightly torn over there and you were to strip the casing around the wire and you let it reconnect where the metal wire is and twist it up, wrap some electrical tape around it, and the controller would effectively work again. I'd actually find a lot of friends with these similar issues, whether it's with their Nintendo 64, their PlayStation controllers, or their Xbox controllers. And really, it's because we all used to wrap the wire around the controller and that would stretch it out and you would get the little tear in there. After controllers started to be wireless, that really wasn't an issue anymore though, and I don't really recall facing too many defects. One of the most obvious things that would stick out to me is on the fat original DS that I had, the hinge would have issues, like it would crack basically. And I thought it was just me being careless with my DS, which felt odd because I really wasn't that young at the time. I wasn't that careless with my handheld. But as I got older, I found more and more people face similar issues, so I was pretty sure that was a defect. Similarly, by the time we got to the Nintendo Wii, I noticed the flap that was on top of the Wii would just really get loose and that hinge was just not sitting properly. I knew pretty early on that eventually that flap would not be on my Wii, and until this day there is currently no flap on top of the Wii where the GameCube controllers are, and I have no idea where that flap is now. It's been years. But despite that, despite the flap, despite the DS with the hinge, my Nintendo consoles from that generation would face very limited issues. So much so that they were actually submerged entirely underwater when my basement flooded, and they were even plugged in when that happened. And not only did the Wii work perfectly fine, I'm talking disk drive and all, after we dried it out post-flood, but all 4 Wii remotes and all 4 nunchucks and even the classic controllers that we had are still sitting under my TV to this day and still working pretty much perfectly. I remember we had a wireless pink Xbox 360 controller that we had to throw out because of that flood, and I remember the power cable for our Xbox 360 got completely fried, so that had to go. I don't remember if the 360 survived or not because we never really used it after that point, and it's either sold or lost to time somewhere. But I know for certain the Wii survived because I still have it and all its contents. I have a Wii U, and I once found my toddlers running around with the Wii U gamepad and they were throwing it down the stairs, which was my fault because I didn't lock the cabinet. And that tablet somehow managed to survive falling down the stairs without a single scratch on it. My Wii U Pro controller is completely fine. Even my GameCube controller that I bought after I got the Wii is still wrapped up comfortably sitting under my TV, ready to go at a moment's notice. It almost made me miss the old days, because I used to be that friend that would fix controllers. Back in the wired days, anytime anybody had an issue, they'd be like, oh yeah, talk to Nintendine, he can fix it. Well, they didn't really call me Nintendine, but yeah. And I would show up with my electrical tape, feel like I was this cool dude using my teeth to strip the wires, wrap it all up in there, and then just reconnect it, and we were good to go. Friends would offer me money and I would decline, and we would just game all night, and that was worth it enough for me. But as time went on, there were just fewer things for me to fix. I felt useless. I felt like there was no purpose anymore. As if I was just another gamer. I was no longer the guy that solved problems. And then in 2017, I got myself a Nintendo Switch. Pretty early on in my Switch's life, I started hearing people complain about their Joy-Cons drifting. Being the intellectual that I am, I laughed it off and said that they don't know how to take care of their controllers and they gotta learn to be a little bit more careful. I would read people complaining online and be like, oh yeah, they probably got a bunch of kids messing around with that thing, of course it's not gonna work. My friends would whine about it, and I'm just like, dude, buy a Pro Controller. You're clearly being too rough on your Joy-Cons. This is very delicate and very good technology. But it only took a short matter of time for me to find one of my joysticks drifting as I was trying to game. At the time, Nintendo still was not willing to fix the Joy-Cons. But if you were to search online, there were a lot of people that were facing this issue, so there were a lot of solutions available if you were just a little bit handy. So I ordered the proper tools and parts off of Amazon for less than 10 bucks, and I very effectively and very efficiently fixed my Joy-Con. I replaced the joystick. Over the course of the next 5 or so years, I would fix 2 or 3 more Joy-Cons that I owned. One of them even had to have been fixed twice because it got drift twice. Now, I should point out that while I do occasionally use my Switch in handheld mode, and I did pretty early on, a lot more, I would say over the course of the past 5 or 6 years, I have used it docked significantly more because I mostly play multiplayer, or if I'm playing single player, I'm trying to capture footage, which means I gotta dock it. And at that point, I'm using the Pro Controller. Now, thankfully, for now, I've had no issues with the Pro Controller despite the amount of hours that I've put into it. But the Joy-Cons, which I have used significantly less, well, let's say I can pretty much take apart a Joy-Con and replace the joystick now without even looking at instructions. Pretty much anybody that I know, any one of my friends now, whenever they have this drift issue, they'll give me a call and they'll be like, yo, like my joystick is doing that thing again. You think you can fix it? And all it really takes is for them to stop by and wait 10 minutes and then bam, their Joy-Cons good as new. And it's made me feel that sense of purpose, that sense of knowing that I'm making somebody's life a little bit better again, that I've longed for since I was a child and had to fix all of those controllers where the wire kept tearing. And while many people saw it as a defect for the Nintendo Switch, I realized it was not a defect. It was the Nintendo magic, the Nintendo charm. Many people laugh at Nintendo selling cardboard for like 80 bucks so that people can get their hands dirty and mess around a little bit and teach their kids to have some fun. But I don't think either of those were the most innovative things about the Nintendo Switch, and I think one of the best features that we should all appreciate about the Nintendo Switch are the Joy-Cons, which allow you real-world experience and really teach people how to use screwdrivers, and from a young age you'd be able to pick up and learn how to fix things. And it goes without saying that I was ecstatic when I found out that the Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Cons were already drifting for some people. Because going into the launch of the Switch 2, I was afraid they were going to use Hall effect sticks, and from my understanding, Hall effect sticks are pretty good about making sure your Joy-Con doesn't drift. Now, apparently there are some third parties that are making these Hall effect sticks for the Joy-Cons that you can replace, but they use magnets, and that could get wonky with the way that the Joy-Cons attach to the Switch, specifically on the Switch 2, so it's still up in the air about how that will work. Now, as the years went on and as I fixed more and more Joy-Cons, it started getting less and less appealing to me. Especially because sometimes these joysticks would start to drift not too long after somebody buys them, including myself. It started to feel like this innovation that Nintendo was offering us was getting stale, in the same way that motion controls, for example, started to get stale by the end of the Wii's life. And just as I was starting to think that there was no more use for the screwdrivers I had for the Joy-Cons anymore, because it was just no longer entertaining for me to fix them, and I would specifically fix them because I knew that sending them to Nintendo meant that the Joy-Cons would be gone for a few weeks or up to a month even, and I figured it was just more worth it for me to go through that experience on my own because that's part of the Nintendo magic. Well, just as I was starting to feel that magic drift away from me, the other day during a gaming session, my cousin was holding my controller and he turned it sideways and pressed the SL and the SR button, and we figured out that the controller would no longer light up. It still worked, but you couldn't use it horizontally. You could only use it vertically. Basically, you're only able to use it as the left side of a controller. And you know, this is very bizarre to me because effectively that Joy-Con doesn't get any use anymore, since now I have 8 third-party controllers and Pro controllers, and generally speaking, nobody wants to play with the Joy-Cons anymore unless we're playing games that require the Joy-Cons, so we're not using them as often. So then I looked it up online, and apparently the ribbon that connects the SL and the SR buttons to the Joy-Con likes to act funny and disconnect if it gets bent too hard. Which is funny because the Joy-Con is manufactured with that ribbon bent. Which means that with this old Joy-Con that I've now had for a few years and haven't faced issues on for a very long time because I don't really use it as often, I now get a chance to go through the experience all over again. And it's kind of nice because I was just starting to feel like the Switch 1 was on its way out. With the news of the Switch 2 and the new Switch 2 Joy-Cons, I didn't think we'd have anything fun to do on the Nintendo Switch 1 anymore. So naturally, with this new issue, I went online on Amazon, found the replacement part, shipped it over, and pretty easily opened up my Joy-Con and installed the new ribbon for the SL and the SR buttons. And it just makes me very happy to see that Nintendo is still treating people with the Nintendo Switch like they are part of this console generation. Newer problems are continuing to arise so that when everybody is in uproar with their new Joy-Con 2s, us with the Joy-Con 1s will not feel left out. Thank you once again, Nintendo.